Do you guys want to build a giant headboard? Hey guys, welcome back to Never Skip Brunch. My name's Cara, and today we're building a ginormous headboard. So I created this headboard as part of a collaboration that I did with the Home Depot, where I transformed this entire guest bedroom. So if you want more details on this space or to see the full room transformation, hop over to my channel and you can find the full reveal. So I'll walk you through the step-by-step for how I created this. We'll start with the design, move into how I built the frame, how I upholstered it, and finally, how I got it to stay on the wall. Make sure to comment below with any questions you have about my process, from the material I used to the process of what I'm actually doing. I would love to help you out if you want to DIY your own statement headboard. Okay, so phase one was to actually design the headboard. I got on Pinterest, I looked at inspo images, and I got an idea of the general shape that I wanted my headboard to be, including the scallops on the top edges and the upholstery tack layout being like boxes with X's in the middle. So then I just created a super rough sketch of my design plan and determined the dimensions. So for width, I needed it to be 8.5 feet wide because between two twin beds and then about 18 inches in the middle for a nightstand. That came out to about 8.5 feet. And then for height, I went with about 6.5 feet because based on the height of my wall and how high I was gonna hang it, that's what kind of gave me good dimensions and good proportions within the space. Okay, so phase two was to actually build the frame. So to get my dimensions right with minimal cutting, I'm using 2 sheets of plywood that are 8 feet tall by 4 feet wide. So I started in one corner and I basically just sketched out the curve of the cutout that I wanted to make. I did a little bit of measuring and then actually used a towel just to kind of draw my circle. This can totally be like freehand. The only thing is to create symmetry, you want to make sure it's the same on the other side. So once I had that traced, I cut it out and then used that cutout piece to trace it onto the other board so that it was the exact same shape, and that's what created the symmetry without having to get all serious creating a perfect curve. So I cut off these corners using a jigsaw, which is one of the 5 first power tools I recommend if you're totally new to power tools. 2 sheets of plywood plus a 6-inch board in the middle to give me that 8.5 feet. One step that I don't show is cutting off some length from the bottom. Cut off about 1.5 feet from the bottom. Okay, then for assembly, I'm actually putting the 6-inch board between the other 2 boards, and I've pre-drilled some Craig holes with the Craig jig, and I'm just using the pocket screws to get all 3 boards attached to each other really evenly. I'm putting pocket screws from the center board to the outside boards, as well as from the outside boards to the center boards, and made sure they were staggered so there's no screws running into each other, but this gave me kind of maximum hold. So once those 3 boards were attached together using pocket screws, I just used some spare pieces of plywood that I had to create some braces across the back and just give those joints extra support. Since these boards are so large and heavy, I didn't want the pocket screws to be the only thing holding them together. So I just spaced 4 of these out evenly and attached them with wood screws, making sure that the wood screws didn't poke through to the other side, aka the front side of the headboard. Here's what my giant headboard looks like in the space. It still needs to be upholstered, but it is like most of the wall, which is perfect. And now it's time to upholster it, which will probably take me like a week. No, just kidding, I'm trying to get it done by tomorrow. The frame's done, and it's now time to move on to phase 3, which is upholstering the headboard. Okay, so for phase 3, which is the upholstery phase, I just started by mapping out my design that I had sketched up in my rough draft onto the headboard itself. So I'm just measuring and kind of drawing out lines for all the boxes and the X's. So this is gonna help me know where to attach my foam, and then all the lines are gonna be where the upholstery tack lines are going to go. This process actually took me a while. Planning is not my forte, so when it comes to like measuring and being precise, I'm not great at that. And then during this process, my husband showed up and I tried to explain to him my vision and what I was doing. He did not stick around too long. So once my pattern was all mapped out, I opened up my rolls of 2-inch project foam and started attaching them to the headboard using spray adhesive. I basically cut them down to size to fit within the shapes I had sketched out, but left a little room around the edges, probably about 1/2 inch, so where you could actually still see the line. This is gonna help me when I put batting over it to know where my lines are, because I'll be able to push down and feel that there's no foam there. Plus, it's gonna help those upholstery tacks get a better hold on the wood versus having to go through foam first. Since this foam is not that thick, I'm actually just using fabric scissors to cut it, but if you have a piece of foam that's super thick, you actually wanna cut it with a knife. A turkey carving knife is actually the best thing to use. Once all my foam was attached, I added 2 layers of batting across the front of the headboard. I tucked these loosely around the edge and stapled them about every 8 inches or so. You don't want them to be able to slide around when you put your fabric over them, but you also don't want to pull too tight because otherwise it's going to pull down your foam and it will lose its shape. I attached the batting to the back of my headboard using a battery-powered staple gun. It's just the Ryobi brand, and it really helps you get the staples in really securely. So for the fabric that went on the front of my headboard, I did sew 3 panels together just because this headboard is so huge and the fabric I chose didn't come very wide, so I needed to attach it. This process was pretty simple because I basically had to sew just 3 straight lines, but if you don't have a sewing machine or absolutely do not want to sew, you can totally use fabric adhesive instead. Also, you can strategically hide your seams where the upholstery tack strip is going to go, so you can't even tell there's seams. Once my fabric was all sewed together to form one piece, I stretched it over my headboard and lined up my seams so that they were right on the line where I'm going to be tacking it down. Then to start upholstering, I just started in the middle half of my headboard. I'm using upholstery tack trim, which is basically like a metal ribbon with all these little tack heads on it, and then you hammer in a real tack every 5. So it has a hole and it looks like you've created a line of tacks, but you don't have to hammer in every single tack. That would take forever. This stuff is seriously awesome. It comes in a ton of finishes and it comes out looking way straighter than it would if you took the time to hammer in every single upholstery tack. So when hammering this stuff in, I just worked across the headboard line by line, starting in the middle and moving towards the outside and pulling the fabric taut as I went, so that when I got to the edge, everything would be tight and ready to wrap under and staple. For my X's, I lined the trim up so that the very middle tack where they cross would be 2 of the holes overlapping, so that I would put 1 tack through both holes in both strips and it would hold that really tight in the middle, and this also helped it look super even, like it was just 1 string of tacks going all around. So once my upholstery trim was on, I started folding the fabric around the edges, pulling it taut and stapling it to the back. My 3-year-old was extremely interested in this process and joined me to have a snack and watch. You want to pull your fabric taut but not too tight. Okay, here's a good close-up on how I do corners and curves. So for curves, you want to cut the fabric into smaller strips, but not too close to the edge. Cutting it is going to help you get a tighter wrap. You really can't overuse staples because it's the back and you want this to be secure. And then once you get to the corners, you fold one side under first, and then you fold the other side across it to create like a really tight square. Okay, now it's time for phase 4, hanging this headboard on the wall. If you've been wondering how I'm gonna hang this massive headboard, here is how. I'm using a French cleat. So basically I've taken 2 2x4s and I've cut them down the middle to 45 degrees. So then that one attaches to the headboard and then the other one attaches to the wall and it just clicks in like this. So this will be attached to the wall and it will hold it against the wall at an angle. So super strong because you can really sink these 2x4s both into the headboard and the wall. So now I'm attaching one of the boards of the French cleat to the back of the headboard. I'm just using some wood screws and I made sure to use some that aren't gonna poke through my upholstery on the side, so make sure you measure that. So once my headboard half of the French cleat was attached to the headboard, I measured out on the wall how high I would need to secure the wall half of my French cleats. Then I used my stud finder and I mapped out exactly where the studs are and measured that onto the French cleat boards that are going onto the wall, and then I pre-drilled holes in the boards to line up with the studs. You do want to pre-drill holes so that your wood doesn't split in half when you put your large 3-inch wood screws through them. If you're ever attaching a giant board to a wall by yourself, here's how you do it. Number 1, I secured the middle of the board to my center stud with my pre-drilled hole. This held it against the wall while I used my level to tip both edges and find where the board was completely level, and then I was able to secure the rest of the screws into the studs with my pre-drilled holes. Next, I measured out and attached my bottom French cleat board to the wall, and then I shimmied the giant headboard over so that I could lift it up and get it hung onto the cleats.
If you're wondering how I lifted like a 2 million pound headboard by myself, I used a lot of leverage, and French cleats are also super easy to hang because they just click in and they're very sturdy.
Instead of trying to pick up the whole headboard at once, I lifted one end onto the bucket, and then that bucket helped me use leverage to lift the whole thing onto the wall. Ideally, you'll have someone to help you, but I do want to point out that this is totally doable solo.
Oh my gosh, you guys, this headboard is finally up. It looks so good. I will have to zoom out and show you a picture because it is ginormous. All in, this project cost about $300, which for a piece this size, if we're talking custom fabric, custom dimensions, custom detailing, you'd be in the thousands of dollars. So the DIY version was totally worth it. About a third of that came from the fabric I chose. Another big chunk was from the project foam, which is surprisingly expensive. But $300 was totally worth it for a custom piece that makes a huge statement.
And then here's what the headboard looks like in the finished space. Be sure to catch the full reveal of this room where you can peek into my design process and see how I styled the space over on my channel.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you should follow me at Never Skip Brunch so you can stay in the loop for all my fun and fresh ideas and catch more tutorials just like this.